You know the story. A girl, a cursed prince, a castle that learns to breathe again when love shows up at the door. You know the safe version. Rose petals, ballroom light, the romance that redeems the monster. But strip away the music, and you can see what the tale is really doing. It's not selling you a fantasy. It's training you for a situation you might not survive. Because in the original context, Beauty and the Beast isn't a love story. It's a captivity narrative dressed in velvet. And once you notice what the story keeps trying to normalize, what it calls virtue, what it calls patience, what it calls reward, the romance starts to rot from the inside. If you want more stories like this, where the fairy tale is the cover story, subscribe. The version most people inherit is softened by centuries of retelling, but the spine stays the same. A young woman is exchanged, transported, isolated, and told that her safety depends on her ability to manage a dangerous man's moods. That's the thesis. Not love conquers all. Not don't judge a book by its cover. The central claim is darker. This tale functions like a cultural sedation. It teaches a girl how to endure a house where she cannot leave, how to interpret threats as tests, and how to translate fear into responsibility. And before anyone objects, yes, later tellings add tenderness, later tellings add choice, later tellings add the illusion that she holds the key. But look at the machinery underneath. Who controls the doors? Who sets the terms? Who watches from the shadows? And why, in so many versions, does the story keep returning to that nightly ritual? Beast asking, Beauty refusing, Beast asking again, like a metronome you're not supposed to hear. Picture this. A winter road under iron gray sky. The kind of cold that bites through wool. A merchant's cart rattling over frozen ruts, his breath smoking in short panicked bursts. He's lost. He's desperate. He's thinking about money, about creditors, about daughters, about the humiliating arithmetic of survival. Then the trees part, and a house appears where no house should be, a great estate lit from within like it has its own weather. He steps inside and finds warmth, food, a table already set. No host, no permission. And because hunger has a way of rewriting ethics, he eats, he sleeps. He believes the world has briefly forgiven him. In the morning, he plucks a rose, something small to bring home, a token that says, I still remember what you like. And that's when the owner finally speaks. This is where the fairy tale tells you who has power. The castle is not magic. The castle is jurisdiction, a private world with its own rules. The merchant doesn't steal treasure in a modern sense. He violates a boundary, and the boundary retaliates. The beast appears like a feudal landlord, not merely angry, but entitled. The message is ancient. You took from my land. Now something of yours belongs to me. And what does he take? Not a coin, not a horse, a daughter. In the best-known 18th century versions, especially those that shaped what later audiences inherited, you can feel the era's fingerprints. A society where marriages were negotiated, where a girl's future was a family strategy, where a household survival could hinge on what a daughter could be made to endure. In that world, the deal is not fantasy. It's an extreme exaggeration of a logic already operating. Daughters as currency, daughters as collateral. Beauty is framed as choosing sacrifice. She volunteers, she insists, she goes willingly so her father can live. But ask the uncomfortable question the story begs you not to ask. What choice is that, really, when the alternative is your father's death and your family's ruin? Is that consent or is that coercion with a ribbon on it? And the tale leans into the ribbon because it needs you to swallow the transaction without choking. But here's where it gets worse. Once Beauty arrives, the castle begins a campaign, not of seduction, of conditioning. In many tellings, she is given fine clothes, rich food, music, a room, a kind of luxury that makes captivity feel like privilege. The beast does not chain her to a wall. He does something far more effective. He builds a world where leaving feels like ingratitude. The castle anticipates her. Meals appear, comfort appears. Wishes seem to rise from the floorboards. This is the oldest trick power knows. Meet every physical need so thoroughly that the captive feels irrational for naming the cage. Picture this: a long corridor with no drafts, candles steady as if the air itself is trained. Beauty's slippers make no sound on the rugs. Portrait eyes follow, not moving, not blinking, but somehow watching anyway. She opens a door and finds a bedroom prepared with obsessive care. Clean sheets, a fire already burning, a dress laid out as if someone measured her body while she slept. Somewhere deeper in the house, an animal sound echoes, low, almost human, cut off too quickly. And then, at the same hour every night, the heavy steps, the pause outside her door, the knock. The nightly question, "Will you marry me?" has often been played as awkward, even endearing. But in its original rhythm, it's a pressure system. He asks, she says no, he accepts, and then he asks again the next night. That loop matters. It is the normalization of persistence. It is the teaching of endurance. It frames refusal not as an endpoint, but as a phase the man is expected to outlast. If you've ever wondered why so many people grow up thinking no is the beginning of a negotiation, not the end of a sentence, stories like this are part of the climate that makes that misunderstanding feel romantic. And yet, the story is careful. The beast is written with enough restraint that you can tell yourself it's safe. He doesn't force himself, at least not overtly. He doesn't strike her. He doesn't drag her back by the hair. Instead, he does something subtler. He controls the perimeter. Beauty can roam the castle, but she cannot walk out into the world and become a person again. The narrative may give her gardens and libraries, but those are interior freedoms, freedoms that don't threaten the structure. And then the tale introduces its most chilling object, the mirror. In some versions, the mirror shows Beauty whatever she wants to see. It's presented as comfort, proof her family is well, proof she hasn't been erased. But read it with a colder eye. A mirror that shows you your home is a surveillance device disguised as a gift. It controls the flow of information. It decides what you are allowed to know, when you are allowed to know it, and how helpless you are to intervene. It's a soft cage inside a hard cage. And what about the rose? The rose is always treated like a symbol of love, but it begins as evidence. It's the object that triggers punishment, the token that turns a father's mistake into a daughter's sentence. In a society obsessed with female purity and reputation, a rose is also a body language object, delicate, coveted, easily ruined, used to measure virtue. So the story builds a moral trap. If Beauty becomes bitter, she fails. If she becomes afraid, she fails. Her goodness must remain intact under the pressure that would crack most people. And then, when the beast finally changes, the narrative credits her virtue, as if she performed the transformation like labor. That's the bargain beneath the bargain. You will be rewarded if you can rehabilitate the danger. Now, someone will say, but she comes to love him. That's the point. And yes, the story insists she does. But the real question is how. Because the tale creates a closed ecosystem where the beast is the only significant relationship available. Isolation is not an accident, it's architecture. When the outside world is reduced to a memory you can only access through a magic mirror, your emotions have nowhere else to go. Your fear has nowhere else to be processed. Your loneliness has nowhere else to land. Attachment forms under pressure. Humans bond in cages. If that sounds clinical, it should. Because the tale is clinical in its construction, even when it's wrapped in candles and silk. Picture this: a dining hall so large it makes you feel like a child. Silver that reflects your face in warped fragments. At the far end of the table, the beast, trying to perform gentleness with hands that could crush bone. He doesn't know how to speak without sounding like an order. He tries anyway. Beauty hears the scrape of his claws on the chair, the rough swallow in his throat, the effort it takes for him not to lunge. And the frightening part isn't that he might attack. It's that she's starting to catalog his emotions like weather, starting to measure her own safety by the angle of his shoulders, the softness of his voice, the speed of his breath. She is becoming fluent in him. And the story calls that love. That's not romance. That's adaptation. But here's where it gets worse. Because the tale doesn't just describe captivity, it moralizes it. Beauty is not praised for escaping. She is praised for staying kind. The narrative doesn't build suspense around, will she get out? It builds suspense around, will she soften him? This is where the story becomes a coded instruction manual. Be patient, be polite, don't provoke. Find what is human inside the monster. If you do it correctly, you will be rewarded with a man who looks normal. Read that again and tell me it doesn't echo through real life. Now, it's important not to overstate what we can prove. Fairy tales evolve, motifs travel, no single version can be treated like a courtroom transcript. But the persistence of this pattern, girl traded, girl isolated, girl tasked with emotional labor, girl rewarded when danger becomes presentable, shows you what kind of social anxieties the story was built to absorb. In the 18th century, when influential literary versions of Beauty and the Beast circulated, marriage was often an economic and social contract first, a romantic ideal second. Young women could be steered into unions for stability, alliance, survival, sometimes with men significantly older, sometimes with men they barely knew, sometimes into households where their legal and social power was thin. The tale's monster husband becomes a symbolic container for a fear that was not rare, being sent into a marriage that felt like exile. And notice the story's genius. It allows the audience to admit the fear while also neutralizing it. Yes, the husband is terrifying, but he can be redeemed. Yes, the marriage is arranged, but the girl will grow to love it. Yes, you feel trapped, but that feeling is just the first chapter. That's how the narrative turns a structural problem into a personal test. If the beast is cruel, it becomes about his curse, not his choice. If Beauty is unhappy, it becomes about her perspective, not her circumstances. The solution is not to change the system. The solution is to change the man by changing yourself. And then there's the father. He isn't a villain in most versions. He's weak, frightened, human. But he is the hinge that makes the trade possible. The story often frames him as loving, so loving that his suffering justifies everything that follows. This is another way the tale launders violence. It routes it through family love until it looks like sacrifice instead of betrayal. Beauty goes to the castle and the father returns home alive. The debt is paid, the household continues, and Beauty's body becomes the payment plan. But you might be thinking, doesn't she leave at some point? Doesn't she go home, get pulled back, and choose to return? Yes, and that return is the most revealing part of all. In many versions, Beauty is allowed to visit her family with conditions, time limits, promises, invisible strings that will tighten if she disobeys. Often, she is delayed by jealous sisters or the slow poison of nostalgia. And then the narrative punishes the delay by making the beast collapse, dying, wasting away, suffering alone. It's one of the oldest manipulations in storytelling, turning the captor into the victim so the captive feels guilty for needing air. Beauty rushes back, horrified, not because she was free and missed him, because the story sets up a moral emergency. Your absence is killing him. Picture this, the castle at night, different now, lights dim, halls colder, the silence heavy as wet cloth. Beauty runs, skirts snagging on corners, breath tearing in her throat. She finds him not in a throne room, not in a bed, but by the garden path, collapsed near the place he first allowed her to walk alone. His fur is matted with dew. His chest rises shallowly. He looks less like a monster and more like an animal that has given up fighting the trap. And the horror is that you can feel the story closing its fist around her. If she leaves, he dies. If he dies, it's her fault. So she says the words. She accepts. And the moment she accepts, the beast becomes a man. The transformation is the tale's final spell, and it's not just magic. It's ideology. The prince's body is the reward for her endurance. It retroactively justifies the terror. See, he was worth it. It reframes her suffering as a necessary investment. And that, more than any claw or fang, is the real horror behind the romance, because it trains an audience, especially young women, to interpret fear as a phase, discomfort as a duty, and emotional labor as a path to safety. It suggests that if you stay long enough, if you say the right words, if you love hard enough, the danger will reveal its true face. But reality does not operate on fairy tale conditions. In the real world, not every beast is cursed. Many are simply choosing. So what do we do with this story now? We don't have to ban it or pretend it has no beauty. Stories can be gorgeous and poisonous at the same time. We can read it like a document, a record of what societies asked girls to normalize and what girls had to tell themselves to survive the normalization. You know the story, but now you know what it's been whispering under its breath. It wasn't teaching you to see past appearances. It was teaching you to endure the unacceptable until it looks acceptable. It wasn't a romance, it was a rehearsal. And the next time you see that candlelit dance, remember the colder image the tale keeps trying to hide. A girl walking into a private jurisdiction, traded for a man's mistake, told her virtue is the key, and rewarded only when the danger becomes handsome. So here's the question I want you to leave in the comments, because it decides what we dissect next. Which romantic symbol should we drag back into the light? The rose, the mirror, the locked door, or another fairy tale you've never been able to look at the same way?